So this is the brand new Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 4, and I haven't touched a foldable device since the original version. That was back in 2019. That one was a cool accomplishment. I couldn't recommend it because it had a lot of problems and it didn't function well as a phone. Like if you wanted to do anything, you literally had to open it up to get things done. The cover screen was just too small, there was too much bezel, and it sucked to type on because of the edge display. I am so glad I didn't review 2 and 3 because coming to the 4 gave me a fresh set of eyes. And all I have to say is I am blown away. Now look, Samsung Canada did not send me this phone. They suck at sending devices. I actually bought this myself. I'm gonna keep it because this is hands down one of my favorite smartphones to use right now. And I have a bone to pick with other tech reviewers because some of them are saying this is a big phone. Yes, it's big in 2 specific areas. It's heavier at 254 grams, which makes it about 50 grams heavier than the iPhone 13 Pro Max, and it's thicker. But the areas that it excels in is handability. You know, you hold this in your hand, it's very easy because it's not wide. For example, here is the iPhone 13 Pro, okay? I have them lined up. 13 Pro is actually a tiny bit wider than the Fold 4. Take something like the Pixel 6 Pro and the iPhone 13 Pro Max, the height is shorter than the other 2 devices. Now, some would call this an actual remote for your TV. I get the concept because it's kind of skinny, but the cover screen is so good now that I feel like I'm not using a crappy phone anymore. Yes, it could be a little bit wider like the Oppo and Vivo foldable phones of the world, but it is totally manageable now. Like I don't feel like I'm taking a handicap anymore when I use this device. It also means that I'm using the front screen 80% of the time. The only time I unfold this is when I'm in bed, when I want to read, if I'm watching some sort of content, or if I need a bigger screen for something very specific. But when I'm out and about and I have to send a quick text message or check an email or quickly load up a website, this cover screen, the 6.2-inch cover screen, is great. Now, every time I unfold it, I hear the hinge move. And I don't know if you guys notice this, if you have a Fold, it feels like you're crushing little bones, right? The way the hinge moves in and out, it has this like pause and then you hear like a creaking noise. I know it's normal, but it kind of scares me every time I open up the device. The other thing is because it has this like protective layer over the glass, it collects a lot of dust. Like it gets a lot more fingerprints than let's say the glass panel on the front. So if there's a lot of lint in your pocket, you will notice it on the main display more so than on the cover screen. 4 megapixel camera is here. It's under the display. You can definitely see it depending on where the light reflects off of it. It's a terrible camera, fine for Zoom calls, but you're not going to be using this as your main camera. Thankfully, there's a front-facing camera on the front. It's 10 megapixels, it takes good photos. And the fact that you can use the cover screen as a viewfinder, you can actually line yourself up and use the main cameras on the back to actually take really good photos. Unfortunately, the crease is still there. You don't really notice it on a white display, especially if you're staring it directly down the middle. But if the screen is black, kind of like it is now, you will notice it directly on, but even more so when you tilt the display from side to side. Now this 7.6-inch main display is absolutely gorgeous. It's 120 Hertz, just like the cover screen. It supports HDR10+, 1200 nits of peak brightness. It has everything you'd want in a premium display. And for some reason, I actually prefer touching this display than I do a glass display. I think it's because the screen's a bit softer, so there's an actual physical press to it, whereas a glass display, you kind of don't get that. But it's something different than your regular smartphone. The build quality is exceptional. Like when you put your hands on this, this will not fall out of your hand. This is one phone where I feel like a case is not needed just due to the width of it and the fact that the side bezels are not smooth like the previous one. It has a nice matte finish on the back, really hard to notice any fingerprints. Of course, this does stick out a bit, which is standard in smartphones these days. And if you leave it on a desk, obviously there's gonna be a lot of wobble. My main suggestion to you is if you're gonna put a case on this, go thin as possible. Remember, this is a thicker phone. It's like having 2 phones in one. So you don't want this to be too bulky. Get something like a thin fit case from Spigen. There's tons of other manufacturers out there, but don't buy a thick case. Like it's just gonna be way too bulky unless you're carrying this thing in a purse. Now, Now the software experience is very interesting because this is the first foldable device to use Android 12L, which was made for tablets. And everything's been good so far. Like, don't get me wrong, I've had a couple of crashes, a couple of glitches, more so than let's say a regular Galaxy S22 or Pixel 6, but not enough to be like, okay, this thing is ridiculously buggy, stay away from it. Just little things, like sometimes an app would have to reload. Obviously, you still get little things like apps restarting when you go from the cover screen to the main screen, but it only happens with a couple of apps. Most apps have learned to adapt to this sort of form factor, and it is working out pretty well. The unfortunate part is just doesn't have the same sort of quality apps that the iPad does. Like, a lot of these Android apps are still just blown up versions of the mobile experience. Sure, if you use a lot of Google apps or Microsoft apps, it'll give you a proper tablet view, but a lot of it is just still very blown up. Now, granted, this is not a big deal because most of the stuff that I do with a big screen is reading and watching. So when I'm watching content on this, it looks great. If you're watching movies and stuff, you will have big, thick black bars because this is a 4:3 display, but it's still a lot more viewing space than you would get on a regular smartphone. Now, one thing I love is the new addition of the taskbar at the bottom. This is very reminiscent of what you'd find on Windows or Mac OS. It just allows you to jump back and forth between your most recent applications super duper quickly. You even have a little square over here that quickly takes you to access all of your applications if you want to open something else. Very useful, especially if you're doing a split screen. You can obviously tap on the app by bringing up the taskbar and then split it, or you can do it in other ways by having multiple windows open at the same time. Now, I'm not a big multi-window guy, but it is useful at times when you need to like refer to something while you're typing notes. Now, the cameras was something that was more of an afterthought with the Z Fold 2, not so much with the Z Fold 3, but with the Z Fold 4, you're literally getting the S22 Plus cameras, right? 50 megapixel wide lens, 10 megapixel telephoto lens, 12 megapixel ultra wide lens. And if you compare the quality of these cameras to the Z Fold 3, there's a difference. Now, I don't have a Z Fold 3 to show you them, but if you watch Danny Wingett's video, which he did not too long ago, there's a lot of improvements with the Z Fold 4. I highly recommend you go check that out. But I did shoot photos against the iPhone 13 Pro, and it really held up. Like, the photos were fantastic. Sometimes it took better shots in general daylight. Sometimes the iPhone 13 Pro did better shots in nighttime. But either way, the camera is definitely a premium experience. Video is good too. It's probably the best on an Android device, maybe minus the S22 Ultra, but I still think it slightly lacks behind what the iPhone 13 Pro can do. All right, quick video test. This is the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 4 versus the iPhone 13 Pro. You guys let me know which one looks better, and obviously which one sounds better. Now, battery life was always a major concern on previous folds. It just didn't last the entire day. But with the update to the latest Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 and the combination of the 4400 milliamp hour battery, I'm having no issues getting through the entire day. Now, obviously, it's not iPhone 13 Pro Max good. Like, I'm not getting that kind of battery life, but I can consistently end the day with at least 30%. And this is with the display always on. I do find that the always on display does eat up a lot of battery. So if you disable that, you could get a bit more, but this is an all day phone. 1.5 days, not an issue with this device. In terms of actual performance, I didn't suffer any stutters or drops in frames when I was gaming on it. In fact, the gaming experience on this is incredible. Having a big display like this to play something like Apex Legends is awesome, you know? Like, I hate staring at tiny screens, and having a 7.6-inch one makes all the difference. So here's the thing, this is still a very expensive phone, but in Samsung fashion, there's a lot of discounts that can be had. They have good trade-in programs, and you know in a few months, the price on this guy is going to drop down. So if you're like me that wants something super easy to hold in the hand, even though it's a bit thicker, but also wants access to a big display without having to carry a second device, I think Samsung did a remarkable job with their 4th generation of the Fold. They fixed all the little things that I didn't like about the original one and put it in a package that's finally a lot more durable and, most importantly, recommendable. Now, I will be reviewing the Z Flip 4 at a later date, so if you have any questions about this device, let me know. Also, there's still tons of promotions going on for this guy, so there'll be links to that in the description down below. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.